What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate. And look, you know what we do. We have real talk in the corporate world, and we do that by centering marginalized voices so that we can actually amplify and center marginalized experiences at work, right? And so we having these conversations with thought leaders, with educators, with writers, with executives, with entrepreneurs and social influencers and activists and elected officials, anybody really, all around, again, centering and amplifying the most marginalized voices in the workplace. And so today we have a returning guest, frankly, a friend of the show. You know what I mean? Dr. Janice Gassam. Dr. Janice Gassam is a educator, public speaker, a consultant, and a senior contributor with Forbes. Dr. Gassam, how's it going?
It is going well. Thank you so much, Zach. I really appreciate you amplifying my voice and consistently amplifying my work. I love that we, have built this support system, and I think that's so important that we are, as quote-unquote marginalized people, we're supporting each other.
Well, I mean, it's not, you make it very easy. You do great work, and your work really is what needs to be centered and focused on right now. I'm really curious, as white folks are apparently learning what racism is for the first time, how have your, what does it look like in your field? Like, are you getting more requests right now? And last time you were on the podcast, we talked about the fact that a lot of folks would ask you not to talk about race. What does it look like now when you have clients reach out to you with requests?
Wow, that's a great question. And things have blown up and have exploded as far as I've been getting so many requests for racial equity workshops. And that's, I'm partial to those workshops. Those are my favorite. But it's just so ironic because even, less than a year or so ago, I would have these discovery calls with clients and, who want me to come in and do a workshop or a training. And they have specifically said, do not talk about white privilege. Do not talk about race. They prefer me talking about the safe subjects like emotional intelligence, which I'm fine with talking about that. But I think that it's limiting in that if you're not willing to engage in the conversation, nothing is going to change. So I'm cautiously optimistic, and I hope that the momentum is still here after the summer is over. And I try to impress upon the leaders that, one workshop is not going to change anything. Whether it's me or somebody else, you need to be bringing people in to facilitate these continuous conversations. I think that is really important, and people seem like they're starting to get it. So, I'm excited about this moment in time right now. I've never been busy like this before since my career started. So I think it's an exciting moment, and I'm trying to take advantage of it.
And so let's talk about that. So, again, in the past, people say, don't talk about white privilege. Don't talk about, black experiences, black female experiences. Talk about gender, but don't intersect that at all with ethnicity, race. What does it look like now when people hit you up? What are they actually saying?
So, I get emails primarily, and they're like, hey, my company wants to, and what's funny, Zach, is that there's such a sense of urgency now, and these same companies, and I'm going to be wrong, I'm going to keep it 100,000% real. Some of the same companies that didn't have money,
right,
once COVID hit, magically found the budget. I had things lined up, and I get it. They came back to me in March and April and said, we don't have the budget. Cool. So now in June, y'all found the budget, I guess,
right,
which I'm like, obviously you're realizing diversity, equity, and inclusion is a priority. So it's usually, the requests come in the form of an email.
Yeah.
I appreciate that people have really been sharing my content on social media. So people often find me either through LinkedIn or through Instagram, and they say, hey, I saw you talk about race and we need this at our company. So when can you find a time to speak, or how much do you charge workshops, or what do your workshops entail? So, that's pretty much what it seems like. But with some of these requests, it seems like there's such a sense of urgency, and that worries me a little bit because I think that it's not like a quick Band-Aid.
Right.
I'm happy to do the workshop. I've been doing these workshops. I've done many workshops, and I already know the structure and everything. However, I think that you have to have long-term objectives And I don't know if a lot of these organizations have long-term objectives. It just seems like they want to do something, so it looks like they're not doing nothing.
Right. What is concerning about that, anxiety inducing for me, transparently, right, is it's very reactionary. And it reminds me of Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail, like that portion where he talks about the white moderate and like how they're more concerned about false peace with an absence of justice. And so even now in this moment, I'm like, okay, are y'all just trying to mobilize something really quick just to say that y'all did something so that you don't have uprisings within your companies? Or are you really looking to create equitable and inclusive working environments, not just for the next couple of days, but for like the foreseeable future as your company moves forward in this new normal? Like that to me continues to be like my ongoing question. I'm curious.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, cause like I've had people reach out talking about, can you come in? Can you do some unconscious bias? No.
And that is the worst. I don't think unconscious bias trainings are trash by any means. I think that most companies are not doing them effectively. That's like a nice way to say it, because I think unconscious bias training doesn't do a lot. Hey, I go through this training and I find out I have a bias against Black people. You might take an implicit association test and see, hey, I have a bias toward or against women.
Right.
So what do I do now? It's like, cool, now I recognize my biases, but if there's systems in the organization that allow bias to persist, it doesn't matter that now I know how to not say microaggressive statements, because there's like bias entrenched and baked into the fabric of the company.
Right.
Like in the way that they hire employees, that they're using a referral. All of these, or many of these consulting companies, it's all referrals. It's all Jim knows Bob, who knows John, and that's how you get jobs. It's primarily who you know and not what you know. And I think that there is benefits to referral hiring programs and systems, but I think the way that they're currently being done is just like creating this echo chamber of the same types of people. So like I always encourage organizations to look at their systems and say, like, are Black people being promoted at the same rates as other people? Because it's cool for you to say, but look, no, we have a lot of Black people, but they're all in lower level positions in the organization.
Right.
But are they in senior level positions? And if they are, how long are they staying? Because a lot of these tech companies, I love that they're being transparent and putting out these diversity reports, but they're not telling us how many of those Black people or those Latinx people or those women are staying in those roles. Because they're like, look, 13% of our population is Black. Yay! That went up 1% from last year.
Right.
Yay! But it's like, are those the same Black people, or did you just hire a bunch of new ones and then those same ones will quit next?
Exactly.
So I think that looking at why there's this revolving door, particularly of Black people, like in the tech industry and in all of these industries, the fact of the matter is that like Black people, a lot of us are not staying in companies, and part of the reason, a large part, I would say, is because of the hostile work environments that we're working in.
100%. I mean, so Living Corporate, we've put out a couple of white papers, but like there's a few different reports, but they're like very rare, like that talk about like turnover percentages. And like, so like I've yet to see anything that explicitly says the turnover for this group is this. I've seen, and like we've cited sources that'll talk about the fact that that Black and brown turnover is like 2 or 3 times higher than their white counterparts. But like, you're right, like there's no annual reporting that shows, hey, our Black employees are 4 times more likely to leave within their first 2 years than their white counterparts. Like that's not those rates are never discussed. But you're absolutely right.
Exactly. I think it's important, and I mean, because these companies tout that they're so diverse, and I think that that's something important to look at, not just we focus so much on the diversity piece. That is important to say, hey, look, we actually have diverse representation, but also like, are they staying? Because if you're using stock images with Black people and that look diverse, that make your company look diverse, but then I get there and I'm like, I'm like the only Black person, that's like false advertising. And there's a lot of that going around. I know the new buzzword is like performative allyship. And there's a lot of that going around with a lot of different companies that shall remain nameless. But I'm glad to see people are really calling them out, these companies out, and saying, you posted Black Lives Matter, but you asked us not to wear Black Lives Matter stuff, or you have no Black people in senior positions, or you have a hostile work environment where Black people don't feel comfortable. So, like, it's cute to, and I wrote an article, like, it's cute to post Black Lives Matter, but, like, we want to see, like, policy changes. That's nice and fine and dandy, and I appreciate your statement, because that's better than your silence, but I want to see more, and I'm glad that people are demanding more of their companies.
I wonder, I still don't think that organizations, and your piece was incredible. We're going to make sure that we link it in the show notes for those who didn't see it.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. But what I don't think organizations understand is that, like, if they come out here really loud externally about all things they're going to do to combat racism and inequity and things of that nature, but then, like, internally, their policies and their cultures, their practices, their behaviors don't change, like, that's going to create more resistance, higher turnover, higher disengagement than they had in the first place.
And as an employee, if I worked in that company, I would just be looking like, okay, y'all are, like, not really about that life. And I'm not about, like, exposing a company that I work for unless I feel like I've been completely mistreated. And I definitely felt like that in workplaces, but my industry is very small. So I just silently exit a company, and I might speak of it, but not give specifics and names and things like that. But I think that you're opening your company up to that type of negative publicity from employees if you're not, like, authentic in the things that you do. And I mentioned this before in a few speaking engagements I've done, but I had a friend who works at a very well-known consulting firm. She's been there for 4 years. She belongs to a marginalized group. She's considered brown. And she said that her company has a diverse referral program, but she says since she's been working at the company for the last 4 years, they've never hired anyone from that diverse referral program. But it's just like, I call it cosmetic diversity, where you have something in place just to look like you're doing something. You look like you're actually about that life, but a lot of these companies are not about that life. So I think that that's just not a good look. If you're going to, like, the talk, you have to also be doing things that show that you're actually putting your words and your intentions into action.
I agree. And to your point around, like, negative press or attention, I think also, I don't know if this is generational, because even I, as someone, I'm 30, right? So, like, I'm not young, but I'm not older. I'm not old. I probably still don't fully appreciate how easy it is for something to go viral, especially something negative. But it's, like, really, really easy. Like, there's so many avenues and mechanisms to, like, share your voice now. And I just don't know if organizations appreciate that. And the fact that, doing that today, like, airing things out, like, putting people on blast, is not an automatic career ender like it might have been, like, 5 or 6 years ago. Like, if you put somebody on blast now, like, that doesn't mean that your career is over. It means you just, like, you may be actually heralded as a hero, depending on how you do it, right?
You're absolutely right. And just like a lot of these racists who say and do things after a year or so when the public forgets, are able to go and get jobs, the same, I think, can be said for employees that put their companies on blast, because so many things are happening in our lives that we forget. Like, I don't remember all these people's names. Are we still going to remember Amy Cooper? Well, we will, because I guess there's a law now with her name. But are we going to remember all of the barbecue Beckys, like, what their actual names are? Probably not. So I do think that you're absolutely right in that companies, I don't think, quite appreciate and understand how easy it is for people to get information out and just share their story and just share, this company has a crappy environment. And you actually shared with me last year that internal memo, that Medium article that those Black, I believe we're all Black or somewhere Latinx, Facebook employees wrote about the toxic work culture. And, there's so many avenues to write anonymous memos and things like that about your company. And so that's not the type of press and reputation that you want.
No.
So I'm really happy that people are like, we need to change. We are really like, I've been getting requests back from like the most fascinating like industry that I never even expected. Like this person is reaching out and that person is reaching out. A fitness company reached out to me and said that they wanted me to do a webinar. A jewelry company reached out to me, and I was just like, wow, you know. So it's like it's every industry. It's industry wide. So it's you know, I think that has really been interesting to me is that everyone is waking up and saying, whatever industry we're in, this is a problem that is like not specific to our industry. You know, everyone is having these issues and needs to figure out how do we create an environment that is inclusive to Black people specifically. Because I think that a lot of times the conversation gets watered down and we talk about other groups, but we don't focus specifically on Black people and Black liberation and things like that. And I think that that's a huge part of the reason why we're here is that we have more ease with talking about LGBTQ plus issues or gender issues than we do racial issues.
You're absolutely right. And I think a large reason of that is because white people can be women and white people can be gay, but white people can't be Black. And so it's like, what does it look like to like really shift and like have authentic conversations that center marginalized people? And it's interesting. I was talking to some colleagues a little while ago and was talking about the concept of like decentering whiteness. And they were like, well, what do you mean? And a large way that we center whiteness is just in our language, right? Like a lot of the terms and things that we've created, we create those terms to avoid Blackness and to avoid the reality of harm. So it's like, we'll have these conversations and we'll talk about, you know, we'll say bias when it's like, and bias is, it fits technically, but it's like, what you're also talking about is like white supremacy or just racism.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're not talking about, this isn't like bias softens it sometimes. Like in certain ways, bias softens in the same way that like, you know, it's not like I have a bias towards Coca-Cola versus RC Cola. Like, no, I genuinely think this person is less than me. And by relation, because of that, I treat this person differently. Like that's different. And then, you know, so anyway, not to go on a rant. So I do think this segues well though into your podcast, Dirty Diversity.
Yes. So I actually started the podcast during Black History Month, and it was important for me to not only start it during Black History Month, but like the first episode was ironically like why your Black employees are leaving, because I don't think that we're talking about these things, and I think that we conflate people with Black people and we lump everyone together. And I think for the sake of like conversation, it's easier to just say Black and brown people, and it is, because your closeness to Blackness will impact your experiences, you know, and there's Latinx people who are stopped as much as us when they're driving, who experience racism just like us and things like that. So, I think it's easy to say that, but I think it's important to put a particular focus on the unique experiences of Black people, and I don't think we do that enough. And when I'm asked to do these trainings, there isn't a focus on when that is the problem, Zach. It's that you're not able to retain Black employees. They're leaving, but you want me to come in and do an inclusion training. Your problem is not inclusion. The problem is that you're not creating an environment where Black people feel like they're valued and they matter. So we need to focus on that specific problem. And I think that watering it down is what we've been doing for so long, and that hasn't produced positive results or changes. So we have to just be bold and call it out for what it is. And I'm so excited because I feel like I have been censoring myself. I censor myself on social media a lot because my colleagues follow me. So I can't be like white supremacy. I can't be using that language a lot because, you know, my colleagues follow me and all of these things. And I know in my field, that's going to get you, that sort of thing is not going to sit well with. But now I feel like I can say what I really want to say, especially in the workshop. And I think that that's going to make people comfortable. But for me, my goal isn't to make people feel happy. My goal is to help you change and help you create better organizations. And the way to do that is like I'm going to have to say things that are uncomfortable, and you're going to have to evaluate your role and how you've contributed to inequitable systems and oppression and things like that.
Right.
And for a lot of people, this is the first time that they've ever taken a look in the mirror. And just in speaking with different white women, they've said that to me, where they said, and millennials, you know, like they're young, they're like, this is the first time I've really taken an honest look at myself. And even though I have Black friends and, you know, I dated a Black guy, you know, maybe I have white supremacist views. And it's like, yes, you do.
You do.
Every white person who's born and raised in the U.S. has internalized white supremacist views. And a lot of it is just baked into our American fabric. So it's like recognizing that and then using your privilege and your power to impact change.
I think that really leads us well into the book that you recently, by the time this airs, it'll be published. So like let's talk about
the book. Yes, and thank you again for the opportunity to just share my work with your audience. And it was important to create the book, but now I'm already thinking number 2 and how it needs to focus specifically on race. But so I wrote Dirty Diversity as like a very simple, practical guide and implementable ways that you can create more inclusion and equity into your workplace. And things that I've learned in the years that I've been consulting now, like for 2 years or so, and I've learned so much. When I started doing these diversity workshops, I knew nothing. I didn't know anyone personally that was close to me that did any sort of, I didn't know consultants like that. You know, just people I went to school with who work at large consulting firms, but I didn't know independent consultants. So I had to figure a lot of things out on my own. I had to bump my head multiple times. So the book is written in 3 different sections, and the first section is for managers. And it's things that are so simple and easy to implement into your workplace. You might say, why didn't we think about this? Or why haven't we been doing this? But it's simple ways to create more inclusion in your workplace. The next section is for people who do diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting, and things that I learned from creating workshops and ways that you can improve the effectiveness of the workshops. But one of the things that I emphasize is that one workshop or one training is not going to make a change. You have to encourage the organizational leaders to do multiple trainings and multiple workshops. And then the third section is written for employees, and just like simple ways and simple things you can include in your workplace to create more inclusion as an employee. Because I get that question a lot, where people say, how do I get my manager to care about diversity? And how do I get my manager to, and I think that it's not just getting a manager to care and it's understanding the value of what this can bring into your workplace. But there are things that you can do yourself, like, I talk about an employee book club. And that's something like super easy, and maybe petitioning your employer to sponsor an Audible membership, because everybody doesn't read. And for me, most of my books, I consume them now on Audible. So like, if you have an Audible membership, you don't have an excuse now to say, oh, I didn't have time to read. You could like take a 30-minute walk and listen to a chapter of a book. So it's very easy now to me to like, for things as an employee for you to implement into your workplace. So I felt like this book was really necessary, and I had no idea all of these events would be transpiring right now, so that I feel like it's even more relevant. And there's so many in the book. I talk about some really simple things, low cost or no cost things that you can implement to create more inclusion. And I think that there's a perception that you have to spend a lot of money, which I do think you should be adequately compensating your consultants who come in. And a lot of times people ask me to come in and they expect it to be free. So I think that is part of the problem. But there are things you can do, like having a panel in your workplace is something that is a really simple way to create inclusion, but you probably didn't think about. Inviting someone like you, Zach, to come in to speak with employees on a panel just about equity and inclusion and different things like that is just like an event that your company can host. And oftentimes on panels, people are donating time or, giving of their time for free. So like there's so many simple ways. It doesn't have to be this like extravagant sort of like training program that can help you to create equity and inclusion. So that's pretty much like the goal is it's a simple read. It's like a little over 100 pages. And I think it's just filled with things that you can do, you can easily implement into your workplace to create more equity and inclusion.
I mean, I'm excited. I've already got a copy, okay? So,
well, thank you so much, Zach.
No, thank you. And so we're going to make sure we put a link in the show notes for everybody to get a copy as well. And the book's title, though, is the book's title Dirty Diversity?
Yes. So same title as the podcast. The reason I titled it Dirty Diversity is because diversity has definitely become a dirty word. People are not into having diversity trainings. There's a misconception about what diversity is, what it brings to an organization. There's still diversity resistance and pushback. So when you say we're going to have a diversity training, people in their minds have an idea of what that is. There's a lot of research that indicates diversity trainings are not effective. So I really was kind of focused on like, what are some things in addition to workshops and trainings that you can, what are some ways you can create more inclusion? Because I kind of resent the fact that I've seen this meme going around and I disagree. I think it's cute and it's funny, but it's like the revolution will not be in diversity and inclusion training. And I disagree with that. I think, have you seen that meme before?
I have. I hear you.
I was like, I don't agree fully. I think when done effectively, workshops, if they're done, if you're having workshops every month, in addition to a multitude of other things like mentorship programs, I think they can be effective.
I agree. I think authentic, intentional workshops paired with other systemic solutions are effective. I think most people, when they think about these workshops, they're not talking about the types of work that you do or the type of work that like Dr. Erin Thomas at Upwork that she does. Thinking more about like the very white comfort centered diversity of thought type workshops. Those are not going to lead us to no revolution. But I get you about, intentional, intelligent, competent workshops along with other things are very effective.
Yeah. And that's, that was my thought. I was like, everybody's kind of, and I try not to curse, but everyone's kind of like crapping on diversity and inclusion trainings. And I do think that in itself, one training is not going to change anything, but the problem is most companies don't even have ongoing trainings or workshops. They have one once a year, if that. A lot of them have never had any sort of training, yet every year they have sexual harassment training, which I find to be interesting. But
well, it's typically to check a box, right? From like a legal perspective, like that's typically what they're doing, or so they can at least say, well, we do this and we do it regularly. It's not really about any type of behavioral change.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like to check a box. So really like how to overcome this idea that diversity has become a dirty word. What are some really simple things? And I'm telling you, it's such a practical, simple, I'm not using any like jargon that you wouldn't be able to understand. It's very like a simple guide. You open it, you read it and say, oh, this is something like so simple. Why aren't we already doing this in our company? Right. But you'd be surprised. To me, like something like a blind resume system. When people tell me they can't find black candidates, can't find black engineers, I'm like, do you have a blind resume system? And they're like, no, what's that? And that to me is something that I think is so simple, but a lot of people just don't know. So that's really like what the purpose of me writing this book was, like simple things that you think a lot of people know, but they might not. And it's just like so simple to implement into your workplace. It's not complicated at all, outside of just workshops that you can do to create more inclusion.
Man, this has been super dope. What else do we need to talk about, Dr. Gassam? Because I want to make sure I give you your space.
So much. There's so much. All the performative allyship.
Oh, let's go in on that real quick. Actually, this is good. So, side note, y'all, for those who are kind of behind the scenes, typically I send out like these very detailed questions before each podcast. But for people that like we kick it or like we kind of get each other's style and energy, we kind of freestyle. So this is actually a freestyle, y'all. That's why we're actively trying to think about what we're going next. We got a little bit more time. So,
I really appreciate that, and we'll talk about how to support each other after we get into the performative allyship.
Yo, let's do that. Okay. Yo, so this performative allyship stuff is crazy, right? Like, I'm so tired of these people. And it's crazy. You know what's really wild is that what we don't talk about is like just, we don't talk about this enough, I think, just like culturally, is like the importance of authenticity, right? So like, I've had people who have harmed me with their racist behaviors hit me up now, talk about, hey, just think about you. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Why are you talking to me? And why would the first thing when you reach out to me not be about the harm that you caused, that you know you caused? Like, these are like racist behaviors, right? Like, these are like things that you gravely harmed me personally and professionally, right? Like, it's not like you walked by, you touched my hair and said, oh, this is like my little pet lamb's hair back at my Meemaw's house. Like, no, this is, you harmed me. And so it's wild. Like, we have just the, like, how members of the majority, go ahead.
I know. It's just like, I'm getting a lot of people hitting me up, like, that are, you know, those people that are in the periphery of your life. They're not in your life, but they're just like there watching from the, I get a lot of those. And there are people who've actively done things to prevent me from being successful. And they reach out to me. Or on the other end, people are asking of me, and I won't get into too many details, just, you know, to protect myself, but there's people who are actively asking things of me without consideration of the events that transpired. You're asking for projects of me and things like that. And I'm like, I'm not in the mental state. And I've had to send emails like that where I'm like, I'm not in the mental state to produce what you're asking me to produce, because there are Black people being killed and slaughtered, videos, you know, and I just, and it's, oh my gosh, you're so right. I didn't even realize it. Oh my gosh, like, it's all because of Trump. This would have never happened if Obama was president. And it's like, I mean, it did happen when Obama was president. Yeah, I was just like, okay, but thanks. Like, so I get those where people are completely like oblivious to what's going on and what's happening and how maybe the Black person I know is impacted by this. So maybe I shouldn't be asking for X, Y, and Z. And I've had to let people know. But I've also seen, like you said, people who've actively caused harm to you. Hey, how are you? Without any acknowledgement of what was done, what was said, your role, and how you contributed. It's just
it's just the cycle. Like,
lots of snakes in the grass.
A lot of snakes in the grass. I think also like just the psychological, like I don't even think like because of that, like even just consider the additional mental and emotional toll you put on that other person when you do that. So like now, as the person who's receiving your random message after a year or after 6 months or however long, now I have to do the mental calculus if I'm even going to respond, and then make a decision. If I respond, how vulnerable do I want to make myself in responding to you, knowing that if I respond to you and you get upset, it could harm me even more.
Exactly.
And it's just so that alone is like, oh, such a rant worthy topic. I do think I do think that it's like when we talk about allyship, and it's like, I just wonder, I'm not curious about it. This is my belief. I don't believe that members of the majority have the capacity to like really deal with being explicitly anti-racist for more than like for a sustained amount of time, right? Like, you're already seeing on Twitter, people are getting burnt out. Like, I know that you guys are probably tired, but here are some tips that you can make sure you drink your boba tea.
No, and you're absolutely right. And it's like, it's exhausting in that. And I know a lot of white people are confused because in one breath we say you should be checking on your Black friends, but in another breath it's like we getting binged and pinged and all of this like left and right. And then you keep having to revisit the conversation of like, you know, why aren't you answering my text messages? I hit you up to check on you. Because I don't want to keep talking about the state. Like, I appreciate that you reached out. I'm not in the mental state. I want to go on a bike ride and just have the sun on my face and not think about Black people being killed.
Right.
I just want to listen to a podcast while riding a bike. Sometimes we don't want to keep talking about it. And what I found is that it's interesting. Companies want to give us space to talk about it without asking us if this is something we want to take part in. A close friend of mine works in a healthcare system, and she said her company was like, hey, can you be on this panel? It's all Black people talking about their feelings. And it's like, I don't
no.
Why do I gotta, you don't even act like you, it's really like, hey, we want you to be part of this panel. No, I don't want to. I had another friend who was asked to talk about white privilege. And she's like, this isn't even my scope and my domain. I'm in PR. Why are you asking me to talk about white privilege? This isn't even like what, just because I'm a Black woman, you want, have her talk about. She was like, what? And I had to send out an email to somebody that asked me to be part of a panel. And I didn't want to be mean, but I was like, when you're asking me to regurgitate and keep repeating why I feel bad as a person living in America, like, you should be paying me. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I know that sounds like, it's not a matter of being all about the money, but it's a matter of, like, this is emotional labor, and this takes an emotional toll on me to be on 80 million, 11 panels talking about what I feel as a Black person and all of this. And it's just like, the idea of paying a Black person doesn't often cross these people's minds who are organizing these events. And I'm just like, at this point, like, my schedule's so busy with these workshops, and also I teach as well. So it's like, with teaching and doing the workshops and promoting a book, that is like, I'm not going to just be on a panel talking about how sad I am and my experiences as a Black person. There's so many think pieces online with people giving this information to you already. You don't need me on a panel to talk about what it feels like to be Black. I hope I'm not being too, like, too raw. Like, but it's just, that's how I've been feeling lately.
I see where you're going, and I will meet you there. So look, folks who are asking, please stop asking us to talk about our feelings for free. I need y'all to stop.
Yeah.
Many of you listen to the podcast, right? Like, and I say you, I mean aspiring allies and white executives. Stop. Now look, especially, and not to be classist, but especially don't be asking a bunch of degreed people to be doing it. Like this, that's crazy. You have people out here who have whole doctorates in sociology and psychology, and you're asking them to come to these panels for free. It's like, no, like, I have the Western colonized expertise from an actual quote unquote institution, and couple that with the expertise of my lived experience. If you ask me for my time, I need you to pay me. Don't even ask. I've had people ask me for my time to do things, and I'm like, first of all, do you understand how much like I'm gonna feel drained after this, because I'm gonna talk about all these things and no one's gonna come back to me with like any tangible resources or support. It's just gonna be me like giving out. It's like, you have a podcast where you talk about all these things. You invite people to talk. And then it's like, on top of that, you write about these things. Right. On top of that, you work full time. On top of that, you're a father and you have a wife. Like, it's just like, y'all got to think about all of these things. It's just like, hey, can you explain to me, like, No, I can't. I'm sorry. I can't. and shameless plug, like, to your point, like, Living Corporate, it's not like we're just like a random podcast. Like, you can go on our website and type in anything and a bunch of stuff will pop up. Like, we have a whole database. So you can educate yourself. And like, there's other free resources. Like, I think it's so inappropriate during this time, like, going back to what you said earlier about organizations, again, white leadership who have either like intentionally or unintentionally like been the cause for people to exit their places of work, are now like sending out these emails with a bunch of different options to have quote unquote real talk sessions. And like, who made you a luminary on the subject, one, but then two, like, why do you just presume that I even want to do this? But the challenge, Dr. Gassam, is like, there's also like the reality, which we don't talk about enough. And like, shout out to Brittany J. Harris of the Winners Group. I see you. She talked about it like explicitly. This was some months ago, about the fact that like power is like the silent P in DE&I, right? Like, it's like, we don't talk about the fact that like, yo, if somebody like a senior executive sends out something to have one of these conversations, there's going to be a certain percentage of marginalized people who feel pressured to join it simply because the person who sent out the invite is in power. right? Like there's a power dynamic that we don't want to address. And also when you ask people to do things, like 9 times out of 10, the black and brown folks you ask to do this type of work or like to randomly jump in this, it's not even their expertise, they're going to feel pressured to say yes because you're in charge. And then when they show up to do whatever you want them to talk about, white privilege, their own lived experience, whatever, they're going to be pressured to not be as honest as they would even like to be because they know that they might get fired or there may be opportunities withheld from them if they say the wrong thing.
Exactly. And I'm actually doing a workshop tomorrow. And the 2 individuals reached out to me to do the workshop. They had told me they don't want to be part of the facilitation.
Wow.
Because there's 500 people who are part of this workshop. And they're worried because in their industry, it's, of course, not what you know, it's who you know.
Right.
And I sympathize with them 100,000% because I'm still, I work in an institution and I can't fully say, I can't go out and jump on a limb and say everything that I would want to say because of that power piece. And because I know that there's still many people who are uncomfortable when you're speaking the truth and when you're trying to. So it's like you can only say but so much. And unfortunately, it's like we need the raw and we need the to the point, and I'm glad people are more open to that right now, but it's still like a concern for us and for people who do this work. And even you as a not only an employee but someone who is in the podcast space, I'm sure there's topics you can venture into but not too much because
Dr.
you don't because it's like I know my audience, there's stuff I'm sure there's a lot of stuff you want to say, but you just
listen. One day
I'm gonna have a tell-all.
One day, no, I literally tweeted this the other day. I said, one day I'm gonna let these ads fly. Like I'm gonna really talk to y'all. But no, you're absolutely right. Like, the power.
I love that.
Yeah, it dictates like literally everything, right? Like, so like I talk differently now because I work. I have a 9-to-5 job. Like the day that I do live in corporate full time, I'm still not gonna be able to talk as free because I'm gonna have clients. And my clients need to know and respect the fact that, I won't air them out one day. You know what I mean? So like the only time that I think you ever really hear like black people speak the truth, like unabashed truth, is like when they have a lot of money, right? Like, so you think about like, you think about like the Will Smiths and Kevin Hart's and Dave Chappelle's and Eddie Murphy's of the world. Like, there's also folks who just don't care at all. And like those voices are needed, but it's just like, I can't shame people for not being 100,000% raw all the time when like our survival is predicated upon some degree of white comfort. It just is. We can't just say we can't speak the truth like we want to. Like I believe I speak the truth pretty consistently. Like don't get me wrong. Like but there are certainly I'm halfway joking about is like there are things that I would like to be much more explicit about, but I can't, especially I have a daughter, you know what I mean? Like you gotta be, you have to be careful. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about supporting each other during this time. So we're talking about like the emotional labor that we sometimes get pressured into performing, or just the increased emotional labor during this time, but also just the general amount of labor that just in being black and brown in majority white spaces. When you asked, or when you kind of suggested talking about supporting one another, like what comes to mind for you?
So many things. So I think that the beautiful thing about this moment and is that it just reinforces that we got us, and the people that, I think that besides the Candace Owens and some of these people out here that maybe don't have us, I'm sorry, besides some of these, these people, I think that for the most part, we got us, and the community that we're building and that we built and the support that I feel from my fellow Black people just makes me really proud to be Black. And I have to say that in April, I was offering these complimentary workshops because I was transitioning from in-person trainings and workshops to online, and I was acclimating and getting myself used to Zoom. So I was like, if your company wants a complimentary workshop, just reach out. And let me tell you, I did 7 complimentary workshops that month, and all of the people that reached out to me were Black women.
Wow.
I love that Black women are always always at the forefront of we're always like, I feel like we have such big hearts and we're always trying to like save the world, and people need to listen to us more. But I just think that in a moment like this, the support and the love that I'm seeing amongst Black people, but particularly amongst Black women, is just what like warms my heart and reminds me why, despite all of the BS and what we're going through, I'm so proud to be a Black person and to be a Black woman. So just the supporting each other, supporting Black businesses and things like that, just reaching out to your Black friends. I think one of the many things I love about us is like, we're going to have fun and find entertainment in anything. And I've been like, we've been crying a lot, but I just find that we make anything into like something funny and into a joke. And just like after the verses with Beanie Man and Bounty Killer, I was just like so entertained by the memes and the gifs. And I was just like, I love us. Like, we are just so funny. And we're just like, so that's, I think, like, the fact that us coming together and just laughing and doing things that bring us joy and just, you know, just the community, I think right now is just, we're building that and we're creating these groups. And so I think that we should all be doing one thing that makes us feel joy. And whether that's like meeting up with a friend, grabbing some ice cream, riding a bike, I've been trying to do that more and more, and just like supporting each other. I have friends that reach out to me and say, hey, I want to bring you into my company. And it's like just that support of like, I see you, I see the work that you're doing, and I'm trying to put you on, is I think what we need more of and what I've been seeing a lot, and I just love that.
Man, I love it too. And you know, with that being said, please, everybody, if you haven't yet, make sure that you get a copy of Dirty Diversity, Dr. Gassam's.
Thank you so much.
It's your first published book, right?
Yes, my very first published book. So I'm awaiting. It is going to be available on June 19th, on both the ebook and the paperback will be available on Amazon. But I'm also awaiting Audible approval because I recorded the audiobook. So I'm just waiting on that process now. Hopefully it'll all be good by June 19th, but I think by the time this episode drops, it'll be available via Audible as well.
Well, that's dope. And we'll make sure that we signal boost any of the promotions and advertising for it on Juneteenth. And then we'll also make sure y'all check out Dr. Gassam's Dirty Diversity podcast. So Dr. Gassam, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, she's way more fancy than me. So her guests, I mean, we have great guests. Like, don't get me wrong. We have amazing guests. Like, so let me not play. But I'm just saying.
Yeah, you guys have amazing guests.
We have dope guests, but I'm saying your guests are nothing to sniff at. You know what I'm saying? So, like, make sure y'all check out Dr. Gassam. You know, the breadth of...
Thank you so much, Zach. I really appreciate. Thank you for amplifying our voices and trying to use your platform to put more of us on. I think that that's an inspiration to me, and that's what I think we should all be doing, is using our platforms and our power to put other people on, our people on. Really.
No, I feel you.
But thank you so much, Zach, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Yo, same to you. Listen, y'all, this has been Zach with Living Corporate. You know, we having these conversations weekly. So again, this might be your first time listening to Living Corporate. So as a reminder, or as an FYI, we have Real Talk Tuesdays. That's when we have these, like, one-on-one conversations. We then have Tristan's Tips on Thursdays, and then we have the Link Up with Letitia or See It to Be It with Amy C. Waninger on Saturdays, like those kind of interchange. And so we have essentially three different series a week. And so make sure you check out. We're all over Beyonce's internet. Just type in Living Corporate, we're going to pop up. And then, you've been listening to Dr. Janice Gassam, public speaker, entrepreneur, educator, podcaster, and writer of Dirty Diversity. That's also the podcast. Make sure y'all check out all the links in the show notes. Till next time, peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.